Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Simple Living High Thinking. And once again, I'm joined by Varangi Radha Devi Dasa and Tadeo Souza. So we are in chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, where we do a weekly unpacking of Tukaram Prabhu's weekly Friday night Gita class. And we are at we left off at text 28 last week, so we kind of started at text 29. Tadeo, do you want to give any sort of summary of kind of where we are in the middle of the chapter here, circumstances?
Sure. So chapter 3 starts continuing. So Arjuna have been told by Krishna that he is not his body and that he should do his duty without being attached to the results. That's essentially, from a super high level, the summary of chapter 2. And starting on chapter 3, Arjuna shows some kind of bewilderment still on that particular teaching. He's asking Krishna, hey, you're giving me equivocal instructions. So please clarify precisely, like, what should I do? Which then leads Krishna into thinking that, well, maybe either he is quite bewildered and he wasn't properly, he didn't properly understand what I have just tried to communicate to him in chapter 2. So Krishna then decides to take a step back and start teaching Arjuna essentially the same principle, that you are not the body, but from a, let's say, easier to digest point of view for Arjuna, which is to say, okay, look, yes, you're not your body, and in this material existence, we are not the all in all. There is a much greater reality that exists, namely the spiritual one, and we are but a small part of that. We do have free will, but it's limited, and therefore, with your limited free will, you're not the ultimate doer of everything that happens. So then Krishna tried to address Arjuna's bewilderments from that point of view by taking a step back and starting over the concept that you're not the body, you live in a much bigger existence, and starts to explain how, just do smaller things then. Act in a way that you recognize that even the food that you eat is dependent on rains, for example, and who is making it rain is not you, obviously something else. And in that way, becoming really aware that you are a small part of a much greater reality, and offer obeisances to that, like be aware, be thankful to the various, let's say, demigods even, that are in charge of universal functions such as rain, wind, etc. And become part of that recognition of something greater. And little by little, simply by acknowledging that there are much bigger things, you can then evolve. So start acting in that way that takes you out from the center of everything, and step by step, gradually, you will start acting more and more towards this greater reality. So I think that's then the beginning of chapter 3, and leads us to where we left off yesterday. Left off last week and pick off from yesterday. What are your thoughts, Varangi?
Yeah, great. I think you touched on the main points that we've covered thus far, I think, in the whole Gita. And Krishna is, like you said, you briefly mentioned that in the second chapter, we see Krishna introducing something that really should be just the ABCs, right? But he quickly finds out that Arjuna wasn't ready to hear that yet. For many reasons. He was undergoing a really deep crisis, existential crisis. And obviously that manifests in a bodily crisis as well. So Tukram touched on this point last night, that it's really difficult to think clearly when we are so bewildered, when we don't know which way is up, when we are so deeply attached to our myopic vision. We can't see the big picture. So that's what Arjuna is going through. And at this point in the third chapter, like you mentioned, Krishna takes a step back to then allow Arjuna to find somewhere where he could take a step and a grip, right? Kind of like rock climbing. It's like you can't go to the top unless you start somewhere near the bottom. And so Krishna provides those first two rocks on which Arjuna can take a hold of the philosophy, and which really is, start where you are. If you are completely in illusion that everything revolves around you, at least realize that not everything is about you and not everything comes from you. And if you are ready to take a step further, then start recognizing who are those beings behind the different things that come to you, like food, like you said, the rain, all the different, I think, components of life. And if you do that, then now you can work and offer the fruits of that labor to those beings that are above you. And little by little, while we progress in this path, then eventually we'll get to realize that there's one source that's connecting all those different dots, and we're one of those dots, right? And so the purpose is for Arjuna, hence all of us, to realize that service or connection to the divine is actually the biggest and the highest goal of this whole practice. And so yeah, and I think right now in the third chapter, Krishna is really just diving into how a self-realized person, once he has gotten to that platform of self-realization, he sees everything clearly. So he's no longer doing his duty for his own benefit, but now he continues to do his duty to set an example to those that are looking up to him and are following him. And this person, because he sees everything, he or she sees everything clearly, is able to understand also by Krishna's information here, not instruction, but information, that the self-realized person should also not try to detach that person that's attached to the material world prematurely. So allow them to continue to work at their own pace and at their own level, while he or she who is self-realized continues to walk that self-realization path, and in this way is setting a great example for these other people. And somehow or other, this person that's seeing clearly is able to see how he can engage different people that are at different levels to show them what the highest goal is in life. And so, like Kim mentioned, last week we covered text 28, which really was wonderful because it really highlighted the importance of really seeing clearly, and how Krishna consciousness or God consciousness is actually the way to go, the way to get out of this dense material jungle, right? And this person doesn't engage himself in things of the senses. And so last night we covered about 3 or 4 more texts that really just, for me, it was like, oh yeah, this is the helix that Tukra Prabhu brings up so much. You know, we're going over the same concepts, but really Krishna is adding so much more. And I know this is something that Soza is gonna have to share with us, because at the end of that class, something really magical happened that really blew my mind. And not only, I guess, realizing that Krishna is actually so smart and so brilliant, and he actually has our best interest at heart, but he's like the best example of that self-realized person. It's like he understands everything clearly, but he knows how to set up the information in such a way that people that are sincere and want to learn will realize these pieces of information that are just really jewels along the way when we're ready to grasp that. And I really saw that so clearly last night in the interaction that Soza had with our teacher Tukaram Prabhu in analyzing one of these verses that I'm sure Soza's gonna gracefully share with us. That's text 30, and how Tukaram Prabhu so expertly linked it to verse 247 and showed us how Krishna is actually doing the helix form of teaching. And this was really inspiring for me in so many levels. And so I'm really, hopefully all of you are like, okay, tell us what it is. And I throwing it back to you, Prabhu. I hope that you can indulge us
Hare Krishna.
in analyzing this.
It's a great honor. We, like we mentioned, Varangi, in the beginning of our podcast, you know, we've been doing this for 13 years now under Tukaram, right? And we say the Gita is always new, and it is a concept, but we get to taste it, right? It's not just a concept. I think the excitement you are expressing, certainly I share. And it happened yesterday again, you know, 13 years later, is like, wow, like having gone through Gita so many times, first of all, I would have never seen it by myself. That's why, Kim, I think in one of our previous episodes, you were speaking about the importance of a community, how important the community of devotees is. We certainly know that concept, and having read the Gita for at least 20 times and having studied deeply under Tukaram, I would have never seen this on my own. So it does require somebody like our teacher Tukaram to point out these things to us, and it shows how important it is to always be grounded in the presence of those who know more than we do, so that they can continuously push us up, you know? So here it is. I mean, yesterday, so what happened was I was contemplating text 30, where Krishna says, therefore, Arjuna, surrendering all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to proprietorship, and free from lethargy, fight. So this text, it spoke so deeply to me because it covers so much ground. Krishna, from a theological perspective, Krishna covers so much ground here, starting with the surrendering all your works unto me, but then going into full knowledge of me. That is capturing both your acts, your behavior, but also your cognitive, the way you think, what's the contents of your mind. And in world religion, there tends to be a focus in one or the other, sometimes one to the exclusion of the other. And is a source of a lot of misunderstanding and confusion. And unfortunately, for those that are trying to be sincere in either one of those paths, if they happen to be following such a religion, it's unfortunate because you don't really get the complete picture. The idea here being that all that matters, if I am in a religious tradition that focuses on acts, your actions, your behavior, then the followers of such religion, they tend to just act right, but not really pay attention to the knowledge or the philosophical, theological contents of their minds and their relationship with their God. One example, which may be extreme, but definitely paints the picture here, was what Tukaram Prabhu shared with us himself, where he attended an inter-religious conference. He was speaking on behalf of Vaishnavism, which is what Krishna consciousness is. And there was a rabbi priest there. And this rabbi, being on the side of all that matters are your actions, as long as you're acting properly, you are on your correct path. This Jewish rabbi said, hey, you know, I act properly, you know, all the sacrifices, all the rituals, everything that we engage to, I act properly. But I don't even believe in God. It's like, that's so bewildering for somebody who carries such a position, like a rabbi of a community, to make such a statement. I don't even believe in God, or like not atheist, but like agnostic, whether God exists or not, but I act right. So you can see that it doesn't seem to be fully complete. Now, the other aspect, the other extreme are those who, and I'm going to speak about Christianity here because it's the one that I'm most familiar with. A lot of Christians have the idea that, well, I accept in my mind, in my intelligence, in my cognitive way of thinking, I accept that Lord Jesus Christ died in the cross for my sins, and that he's God's most beloved son and died on the cross for my sins, and he's my Lord and Savior, and therefore I am saved because I believe in this principle. I believe that Christ did that for me, and therefore I am saved. And I don't have to act in a pious way. Just if my belief is correct, doesn't really matter the way I act. So there's no need to transform your life so that you live a more pure, a more sincere, a more grateful and loving and non-violent, etc. type of life. Because as long as you believe the right thing, what you do doesn't matter. So as you can see, both extremes remain incomplete. And Krishna here, just with one sentence, he just unifies those two concepts, which are really powerful if they're put together, which is that definitely what we in Vaishnavism do. So surrendering all your works unto me, then that's how you act, right? But then with full knowledge of me, now that's your cognitive. So the way you're acting and the way you're thinking, they're both aimed at Krishna, at God, the Supreme, right. And they're unified. And that unification of these two principles is so powerful. It is certainly much more powerful than either one of them standing alone, as we just discussed, the two examples. So then moving on in the text, it says, without desires for profits. Well, so much suffering and evil is done in this world due to greed. Greed of either material things or greed even for people, which sometimes is lust. But greed itself is such a terrible power that causes so much suffering for so many beings. But if you attain a place where you have no desires for profit, then you are free from that. You are free from this greed. Moving on with the text, with no claims to proprietorship. You know, I believe at some point or another, perhaps in the beginning of our podcast, I may have mentioned that I do have a company, and I do tend to think about it like that. It's my company because I created it, I started it, and it's my company. But is it? Is it really? Like, who gave me the intelligence to who gave me the inspiration to start a company? And then the intelligence to continue. It wasn't, for me, as far as science can tell, this is just a bunch of chemicals going on in my brain sphere here. Where does the inspiration, the intelligence, the know-how, where does that come from? So does it really belong to me? So if I am free from that, I know that not even this body belongs to me. If I'm the soul and I'm not the body, this body is not my property. And likewise, nothing in this material world truly belongs to me. That is a very deep spiritual concept, like the very high spiritualists that we see. Some of them, they have no possessions. They walk around like Jesus Christ, like Mother Teresa, like yogis in India. They have nothing. Because they understood this point, nothing is mine. I'm not the proprietor of anything. So this is like a very deep spiritual realization that nothing here belongs to me. And then free from lethargy. The nature of the soul is to always be engaged in something. And also the nature of the soul is that the soul is full of knowledge, full of bliss, and is eternal. So being full of knowledge and always active, the soul is always doing something. It's our very nature to have inspiration from within, to act and to act from an intelligent point of view and do things that are good for not only for your own benefit, but for the benefit of others. So this is the nature of the soul. But when we are incarnated in these bodies, polluted by a contaminated mind, we tend to develop lethargy. We'll do it tomorrow, then we don't even do it at all. And then so many other negative energy can come from that. Lethargic, like just get a picture of somebody in your mind. That person is lazy. Like you can see the person is sitting. The person doesn't want to get up. The person doesn't want to go to the gym or walk or live an inspiring life. You're just lethargic. And that's such a bad vice in a human body. To act lethargic is a pretty bad vice. And then our Krishna is saying, no, free from that. Like you don't have that. Again, pointing to such a high spiritual concept. All of our swamis are incredibly busy people. They're writing books. They're circling the world many, many, many times. They care for thousands of disciples. They take all their burden up onto their hands and their conscience, and they care for so many people. My own guru, I once had a one-on-one conversation with him, and he was just thinking in his mind about the lifestyle that he has chosen to be a celibate monk and therefore not have had any biological children of his own. And then he said, yes, this life allows me to love the entire world as if they were my family. Mm-hmm. You know, and sometimes we have families that are broken, and that love doesn't even exist within your own family. It's very few people. And his contemplation was that, yes, I don't have that. And the lack of that allows me to have thousands of children, and I love and I care for them all the same, you know? So that's this idea. I'm not lethargical. There's thousands of disciples. They're writing books. They're getting on airplanes. They're traveling the world. They're translating books. They're doing so much. They're so engaged in this fight, the fight to diminish ignorance and bring about the wisdom of spiritual intelligence, you know? So there's just so much in this verse, and I was thinking about it. I was like, wow, this verse is so packed with so much information, so much knowledge, so much wisdom. Like Varangi said, only Krishna can say it in such an intelligent, compact, and even poetic way. So I was mind blown just by contemplating that verse. So then in a class, I thought I would share that with Tukaram, and I said, hey, you know, I'm just contemplating the completeness of this verse, and it's amazing. So that was amazement number one. Then amazement number two is that Tukaram says, oh yeah, then check out 247. And I'm like, what? Like, what do you mean by 247? So then when we go to the previous chapter, chapter 2, text 47, and again, amazement two is that not only he understood what I was referring to about this verse, but he was able to find the verse from which this text 30 evolved, is what Varangi was talking about. We are told the concept that the Gita work in helix-like fashion, that Krishna puts out a concept and then continues to develop that concept throughout Bhagavad Gita. And again, you know, we've seen it. We've seen like for 13 years now, I've been seeing this, but I never saw this specific one. So then when Tukaram says by heart, like in a split second, he knew exactly the verse from which this evolved. And he's like, oh yes, 247. And then he even said, you know, it's 247. It could be 248, but check out 247. And it was actually 247. He was right the first time. So now 247 says this: you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activity, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Now let's read them side by side. That's where the magic occurs, right? So first I'm gonna read text 30, and then I will stop and read the matching from chapter 2. So text 30, Krishna says, surrendering all your works unto me, All right. So now 247 starts by saying, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty. So you have the right to perform your prescribed duty. That means you're acting. But in chapter 2, the concept of dedicating your actions to Krishna hasn't been completely fleshed out as it has already in chapter 3. Or if anything, Krishna is saying it right now, just give it on to me. So you have the right to perform your prescribed duty, then surrender all your works unto me. Now, moving on, text 30. With full knowledge of me, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your action. So 47 then says, but you are not entitled of the fruits of your action. Well, why? Because you're in full knowledge that the results belongs to Krishna. You're acting because you want to please Krishna. You're not acting to please your own senses and for your own sense gratification. You are in so much love with Krishna that every single action of yours is dedicated to please your beloved, Krishna. So then they keep on going hand in hand. So now moving on text 30, without desires for profit. Now, the equivalent on 247, never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities. Well, with no desires for profit, because you're not the cause of that profit. So if you act and you believe that, oh, I did this, and then now the profits that you would achieve through your actions, well, they belong to me because I did it, right? Well, Krishna is saying, no, don't have desires for profit on 30. But then on 27, he says, don't consider yourself the cause. If you're not the cause, the profits are not yours. So it's again an exact match. And then on 30, back to 30, right? Moving on. With no claims to proprietorship. Again, the same idea. Like, it wasn't you who did it. Don't be attached to the results. Don't desire for profits. Don't have any claims to proprietorship.
Don't think that you're the doer, because
Correct.
you're not.
Correct. Now finishing text 30, it says, and free from lethargy, fight. And then back to 47, 247, Krishna ends by saying, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Like if you're attached to not, like if it's your duty and you're not doing it, why is that? Because you're being lethargic. Like it's your duty, you have to do it, but you're being lazy and you're not doing it. So then now, again, right? So 30, with no claim, and free from lethargy, fight. And then 247, never be attached to not doing your duty. So you can almost read from 247 and then continue
straight
on 30.
to
Yeah. It's like, never be attached to not doing your duty, free from lethargy, fight. It's like, it's begging to continue. It continues right there. And that is such the helix that we're talking about, how this one verse evolves from another. And Krishna is so poetic, he's so brilliant. The way he's teaching Arjuna is so eloquent and it's so powerful. And these are the things that really excites us, because we've been reading this text for 13 years now, and I hadn't yet seen it in this particular way. And to be blown as I was by text 30 itself, and then have Tukaram say, oh, then check out 247. And I'm like, not only is it complete, but it is complete as it continues the previous one that was already very powerful, but is enhancing that verse, is continuing the verse, and it is complete. And then I was like, poof. So then I was like completely bewildered, right? So it was amazing.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, I liked the part when you guys were going back and forth with your question with him, which, yeah, like Rangi said, it blew my mind too, that, oh, the connection, and then having Tukaram reference chapter 2. The part about where you don't get possessive, even if you're a sannyasi or you've gone into full renunciation from a material viewpoint, whatever you have, you can't be possessive even with the little that you have. It's you give it all to Krishna. Now that's real renunciation. So, I was listening to lecture by Radha Swami recently, and he said, yeah, if you're really attached to being renounced, really attached to living renounced under a tree, or really attached to making tons of money on Wall Street, neither situation is good, which was a really good perspective. And then he also said that, yeah, if you have a job where you make a lot of money, keep the job. Like, just give what your money to Krishna, and how can you help the movement and help serve your guru and your teacher. So all these different perspectives on renunciation, whereas the ideas that I had previously coming into this tradition was has really opened my mind.
So, yeah, Kim, absolutely right. And I just want to make a point here that having had a great interest for many different traditions, I came across some of them that were very heavy on this point, right? Oh, you need to donate 90% of the money you earn. And it's almost like a prerequisite. You can't even belong to their church or mosque or synagogue or whatever if you don't give like 90%. They even put that number, like 90% of your paycheck, you know, and it's so heavily centered around give me your money, you know, and that to me never really sat right. Are we saying the same thing here? Like, we're not. You know, I just want to make this point. It's not like we give everything for Krishna. Is that because we love Krishna so much, because we are striving to love Krishna so much, it is only natural that the things we do and the things we have, we're going to use to glorify Krishna. We're going to use to spread the word of Krishna's existence. And we're going to use to please his senses. So it is our own desire. And I'll go back to the experiences of being a father. Now I have a 3-month-old today. To this day, you know, on the dot, she was born 3 weeks ago, and then this is my third child. And he's like, you know, which child you love the most, the first, the second, or the third? And Tukaram said that once, and he was right again. You know, it's like, it's not that you love one more than the other, it's that your heart expands and you love them all the same. But there's, your heart grows so that there's room for one more. You know? And in that state of consciousness and heart and feeling, like there's nothing I would not do for these little beings. You know, like you love them to such an extent that you don't mind waking up in the middle of the night and taking care of their puke, poop, or whatever it may be, and pee, you know? And it's so unconditional. And I'm working and I'm thinking, oh, great. Like, whatever profit may come from this, I can use then to do this thing, to provide them with something that I know they want, that is going to make them happy. Well, it's the exact same thing, except what I'm saying here, it's more material because it's for my material children, let's say, in one aspect. But here's pure spiritual. You love Krishna, and then you work, and the things you, the profits you have, you give it to him out of your own nature, your own willingness, your own love. Nobody's forcing you, nobody's putting like a percentage, how much money you have to give. You're giving because you love Krishna, and that's what we are striving to do, to get to the point where we love him so much that everything we do is for him. And that's the renunciation we're talking about here.
Super nice points. I want to share something about this exact point that I've heard, which is that up until this point, and I mean this point meaning up until when we come across a real deep, logical tradition, spiritual tradition, and up until the time where you really start applying those teachings into your life, we really have been trying to connect with everything in the wrong way. So we think, oh, okay, you know, I don't belong to a community, or I don't belong to a church, or nobody owns me, I'm my own boss, even a family, I don't have kids, I'm free. These concepts and these kinds of mantras that we hear just in our society, like I'm young and I'm beautiful and I'm like free, I can do whatever I want, things like that, right? We think that that's like actual happiness and actual, like, the best way for us to use our money and our time and our resources. But when we come in contact with this spiritual wisdom, we understand that all these different things and the way that we've been engaging with them has actually fallen short. And it's not like the best way that we can connect. Only when we attach those things, and it starts out like Soza has been talking about, it starts out with your mind, and then it manifests into actions. So when you have this combination, obviously connecting it to the Supreme, then it's not that the enjoyment is no longer there. It's not that now you have somebody dictating how you spend your money, or that you have been brainwashed to give all your money or your time or your resources to this group if you want to belong. It just, actually, you realize that by connecting your resources, your time, your money, your family, your heartstrings, because you build relationships with these people in the community, right? With your teachers, your mentors. It's a symbiotic relationship. So you're assisting in this bigger yes, right? We're living for something higher than ourselves, which statistics have shown that it's actually the number one way in which people can actually increment their happiness. And there's no other way, not by raising their salaries or getting a bigger house or having more stuff, but by living for something higher than ourselves, we can actually feel more happiness. And so we understand that by connecting to something higher than ourselves, then we are becoming happier. But also, we're getting so much more in return because we're connecting it to the source of everything. And so what I mean by that in a practical sense is this. I was just thinking about this today. It's like, wow, it's been such a crazy week. Like, I'm honestly just like super busy. Like, I work full time, I'm married, and I'm like really involved in my church. And it's like, it takes a lot of energy, and it's all stuff that I love, but it takes a lot of energy, and I don't have that much time to, like, me time, right? So I was thinking this today in my 5 minutes before logging on and and streaming live with you guys. I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's not that I would be less busy if I wasn't involved. I would be just as busy because that's my nature. I love to get involved. I like to make things happen. I want to be an agent of change in the world. So I'm going to be busy one way or another. Now, the only thing that I have control over is to choose how I want to be busy, or what I'm going to give my time and my resources to. And instantly, it was inevitable. Like, I just felt so grateful that I am involved in this mission for spreading God consciousness. First of all, for me, practicing it myself and being in this path, although I'm not there yet, I'm in this path and I have seen so much transformation, but also that I'm actively engaged in helping this wisdom get to as many people as I can. And so that gratitude really is what changes everything. It really lets you know, or lets me know, yeah, I would be doing the same thing, but for the wrong reasons. I would still be spending money, which, by the way, I don't spend that much money at all in anything related to my spiritual life, but certainly time and relationships and connection and my resources, my personality, things that come natural to me. I'm definitely investing a lot of that. But I'm also feeling really happy and whole, and I'm able to connect to everybody around me in a much more real way because I'm connecting to the Supreme. And so even if we're not being successful at our duties, right? And I know this is coming up shortly in the chapter. As long as we're still doing our duty, we're in this path of connecting to the Supreme, and therefore it's perfect. Whether the fruit is what it comes out to be, like what we expected or not, as long as we're doing our duty with the correct mindset, right? And with the right guidance, then it's perfect. Because if we're not connecting it to God, then we're going to be connecting it to something else, and it's going to be misused and wasted. And in this line of thought, I also thought that word lethargy from this verse 30 it really also sounds like being awakened. So instead of being lethargic, half asleep, or sleep, Krishna's telling Arjuna, wake up,
Yeah.
like get up, be yourself, stop thinking or being in a state that you're not. That's not your full potential. You're never going to be happy this way. It's like we're half asleep. You don't know if you're awake or sleeping, and you can't really sleep and you can't really get up. I'm sure you've experienced that state. It's really uncomfortable. It's like you can't really rest, but you can't really be fully aware. And when I read this part of that text, I could really identify to that. It's like, wow, how much of my life have I lived in that state of like thinking that I'm fully enjoying, that I'm free, that I'm like my own boss, nobody owns me. But really, I'm just a slave to so many other things. My uncontrolled mind, serving really bad masters, you know, not only like our bosses or people that also want to exploit you, but just like your mind, your senses, your body, even fruitive goals, right? Like you mentioned, your company. If you have your company and all these resources, but you're using the fruits of that labor to do something negative, you're also being enslaved by that negativity, thinking, oh, I'm the boss of this whole company and things like that. So yeah, it was a difficult realization to have, at least personally. It's like, how much of my time do I actually spend it in a vegetative state where I'm not fully awakened, when I'm not fully aware? And it's in these moments where I'm studying, where I'm connecting with my community, where I'm investing in that bigger yes, that I feel like I'm alive, that I'm awake, that I know exactly what I need to do and how to do it, because I have a team of mentors that are guiding me in the right direction. And it's in that state that I really could live my full potential. And so I thought that was like really powerful, besides everything else you mentioned, Soza, which was such a nice description of what actually happened last night, which was a comparison of these two verses, text 247 and text text 47 from chapter 2 and text 30 from chapter 3, and how they're directly related, connected, but in a step up, right? Yeah, it was beautiful. Also, the point that Tukram Prabhu brought up was, this is Krishna inserting that bhakti text for this chapter. So Krishna's talking about this progress and little by little, I guess, advancement that you can make, but also he gives us that hack. But if you do this, if you connect it to me, then you're good. Like, you don't need to offer it to this person so this person can offer it to this person. No, you could just think of me, act in this way. Don't be attached by false ego. Don't think you're the doer, because you're not. And wake up. Live to your full potential. And actually, this is how you can be free from materialism, from the three modes of material nature. And so I know that that's the language that Krishna uses in the next verse, actually, not in the next verse, verse 29, when he's describing bewildered by the material modes of nature, the ignorant, those that are not in that awakened state, they fully engage themselves in material activities. They sink their teeth into that, and that's how attachment happens. And so anyway, I just wanted to express that one point that really connected to something that I realized today specifically. And I wanted to connect that to last night's discussion, because Tukram spent such a big part of the class talking about the concept of we're not this body, which seems to be so basic, right? But it's actually something that most of us haven't realized. I certainly haven't realized it. Otherwise, my life would look much more different. I have realized this to a certain extent, but I really appreciated his introduction for one reason. It really helped me also realize, and I'll stop here so you guys can chime into what you thought about the statement of you're not your body, which is the foundation of the Bhagavad Gita and the ABCs of spiritual life. But what it translated to me at that point last night was, actually, I have such a huge responsibility, and all of us that are in this process, to really walk our talk and to really become qualified to use this philosophy in the right way. So anybody could read the Gita. Actually, there's so many versions of the Gita translated, right? This being as it is, therefore, the most accurate and accurate and correct, because it's really just translated exactly how Krishna spoke it. But it's pointing to the fact that if I'm just going to take something that sounds catchy or cool and then put it on Instagram, or even talking to somebody else, I could really do a lot of damage. So I'm taking something that's so spiritually charged, super pregnant with meaning, that is meant to transform lives. But if I'm immature in my own process and I use it without the proper qualification, and what I mean by that is by your own realization and really sitting with it and really listening to you, people that are above you, on how they describe that and what that actually means, it could be detrimental for other people. And what I mean by that, for those of you that haven't heard last night's class, it's pointing to the fact that there was actually a meme that was going around social media saying that, you know, for those people that are really immature in spiritual life, or fanatical, which I think really fits into one of the models that Soza described today, people that act externally like they're really advanced, but internally they really haven't made that connection. So they're really fanatical. Or it can actually fit into the other one, where it's so philosophical and so dry that externally you haven't made that connection, that actually people have feelings, and we should feel as bad as for somebody else that's suffering, just as if it was our own suffering. So that type of person that hasn't really properly connected these two aspects of spiritual life, how, you know, taking into consideration everything that's going on today, but that has really just happened forever, since time immemorial, all the suffering that's going on in the world, and attaching a piece of philosophy such as, don't worry, you're not the body, could be so callous, could be so cold, could be so negative, and could really push somebody away, because there's no understanding, there's no bridge, I think, connecting that philosophy, which is really powerful, to reality, and to, like, I guess in a compassionate way, realizing how this statement on its own, dry, without any connection to the person, will actually not be able to help them. And so I was humbled by this concept from last night's class, which was, yeah, this is a really important point. This can actually change the world. This has actually changed our lives. We have understood to some extent that we're not our bodies, therefore we can focus on connecting ourselves and our resources and our energy to learning who the source of everything is. And in this way, we can better understand how we can help and serve the world at large. But if we don't have that proper understanding and are not practicing it, then we can take these pieces of information in a way that could really strip away the opportunity for somebody else to come to spiritual life, or to even just realize that spiritual life is actually the panacea to everything that we can encounter in the material world. And so I wanted to hear from you guys, if maybe, like, how that introduction touched you, how it hit you, what it meant to you, and if you maybe had the same reaction that I did, because I certainly was like, wow, that's so true. And yeah, I have definitely used that a lot of times in a really, like, inappropriate way with people that it really comes out more with, like, family members, because there's that connection. It's like, whatever, they're gonna love me anyway. But it has been really easy for me to use that piece of information in a very calloused way. And so how important it is for us to take everything that we're learning and studying with a lot more responsibility and consciousness, that, yeah, when we're going to talk about this, it's really not just an external show, but it has to be a package deal with that internal process and yeah, I guess process of advancing. So yeah, any thoughts?
Kim?
Yeah, I was thinking last night when he brought up that meme. I guess maybe I live a little bit of a sheltered life because I didn't realize that people from the Krishna consciousness movement or ISKCON or Hare Krishnas had that reputation of being callous, like, oh, you're not the body, get over it sort of thing. And that's a really, I was thinking about that a lot the last couple of days. Like, that's a really tough bridge to gap. If you're talking to someone who has that impression, how do you even begin to get them to that level of understanding that you were referring to, Varangi? You know, because you guys, you've been studying the Gita for 13 years plus, and even last night, today, you had a whole new realization. And so these are people who don't have that kind of evolution with the sacred text. So how do you even start to get to them, so to speak?
Well, Krishna talks about that very point in this very chapter, to don't unsettle them in their works, but instead encourage them to just do a little bit. Like, you don't have to change what you're doing completely. Continue to do what you're doing as long as it is semi-noble, right? Let's say if you are professionally killing animals, that's a tough one because you're constantly engaging in violence, right? If you are working in other professions that, let's say, the vast majority of everyone in the world would agree that's not so noble, then maybe you want to reconsider that. But that would be the 1 or maybe 2% max. So now really we're addressing the 98% here, and we're saying don't stop what you're doing, continue to do what you're doing, but just take a little bit of that, exactly how Krishna said to Arjuna, who was bewildered, who wasn't getting the concept that he was the body. Exactly what you're saying here, Kim. And just realize you're not everything. You're part of something much greater than yourself. And just take a little bit of your work and be grateful, offer it back. Like your food, like before you eat, just be mindful of everything that was necessary for that plate of food to be available for you. Where did it come from? How did it manifest? Just contemplate that. Just meditate and internalize that point, and then be thankful for the higher forces that made it possible for you to have it. It's just as simple as that. It's just one tiny little step, and you do that with sincerity one day, and then you do it 1 week, you do it in 1 month, and you become something beyond a simple prayer before eating. It will become a realization that, yeah, there are much greater forces that made this thing which I depend on available for me. So you start realizing it right there. So it's a very step-by-step, very gradual. You start exactly where you are. Don't have to make any drastic change in what you're doing. You just do it with the awareness that Krishna also exists. You know? And the last point I'd like to make today in regards to yesterday's class was another verse that we touched on, where Krishna says, what is the verse where he says that those that are not envious, but those that are envious? Yes, 32, text 32. Krishna says, but in regards to the teachings that Krishna is giving Arjuna, he then says, but those who out of envy disregard these teachings and do not follow them are to be considered bereft of all knowledge, befooled, and ruined in their endeavors for perfection. And what stood out to me in this verse was the word envy. We have a concept that, hey, if I am an eternal spiritual soul and full of knowledge, why am I here? Why am I not there in the spiritual world where I once existed? And the simple answer, we're definitely not going to have time to cover this at length today, even though I would love to, but I don't think we're going to have time to flesh that out completely. But let's say that the reason why we fell from the spiritual world to the material world was due to envy. That we envy Krishna's position as the supreme enjoyer, that every single living entity, there's many of us, not just in this planet, not just in this universe, but everywhere. If you are in a healthy state of consciousness, you're working to please Krishna because he is your most beloved, loving object, right? Loving person. So if you then start thinking, well, but why couldn't people also do things for me? Why can I be the center of the attention just for a little bit as well? So that envy mentality is what I want to talk about today. You know, it's right now. We envy Krishna. How about meditating on that? Like, what does that mean? There's a supreme person, and that person gets all the love. And you, as an observer of that fact, you start asking, well, why does that person only get all this love? Why can I love for myself? That's the envious mentality. That's why Krishna is saying here, those that don't envy me. Is Krishna upset that we envy him? He's not. He's not a jealous God. But what would it take for us to not be envious of Krishna? I think oftentimes, if he is, as he is the supreme person and that position is already taken, why are we envious? What causes us to be envious? One time I heard an analogy, which is so great. When you go to a birthday party of a person that you really know and you really love that person, and everybody who is there really like that person, right? There could be 50, 100, 200 people in that birthday party. And at that moment, especially when you're singing happy birthday, everybody, the 200 people that may be there, they're all focused on that birthday person. And they're all singing to that birthday person. And they're all showing their emotions and their gratitude and their love for that one person. It works. That person has done something for you. That's why you love them. That's why you're there. That's why you take your time to show your love for that person. So it's not artificial. It's not that you have to, oh, let go. I'm not going to be the one. Krishna is the one. And yeah, he's there. I'm inferior. He's always the master. And yes, I'm envious. I want people to love me. I want to be the center of the universe too, right? No, it's not like that. Krishna has given so much more to us than we can possibly ever give back to him. And so to just appreciate him without envy, not trying to be him, but to just let go, realize our position, and to just love him is such a powerful point. It is that envy, when we start envying God and his position as the supreme enjoyer, that we start thinking, then I want to be the enjoyer. And he's so merciful that he even gives us the opportunity to fulfill that foolish desire, creates an entire universe, gives us our own body and our own false ego so that we can think we are here, the center of the universe. And as we are thinking that we are the center of the universe, then what happens when people don't respect us the way we want to be respected? What happens when people treat us like we are the body, black body, or whatever other body? Then we get all bent out of shape, so we can't handle it. So even if we were given the opportunity to be the center, which is what we are experiencing in these bodies right now, we couldn't handle it as Krishna does. You know, so yes, Krishna is pointing out here, hey, you know what? We are suffering mainly because we envy him. We want to carry his position. We can simply let go, understand that position is taken. And he's a great person. Like, imagine that birthday person who you were there for. You're there because you love that person. The person has done something for you that you feel okay being vulnerable and saying like, you know what, let's just be here and honor that person because that person is great. That's why that birthday party works so nicely. That's why companies work. We can get one company to say, you know what, Google, Microsoft, whatever it may be, Apple, that matters. And then you give thousands of people Tesla to agree, yes, Tesla matters. And no envy, we all work for this one particular goal, and it works. But it requires us to let go of ourselves, wanting to be the center ourselves. Krishna is the center. He's actually the center of the universe. We let go of our envy, all that is left is the realization of who he is, which is a loving person. And we will love him in that way, you know. So I was just contemplating the nature of our envy to Krishna and what can happen if we let go of that. And I just wanted to share that point too.
Thank you for that. And I think the starting point to get to that platform of realizing that Krishna is in the middle is by the ABCs of, realizing we're not our bodies. And Tukaram said something really powerful last night. He said, realizing this piece of information, this piece of philosophy that you're not your body, and actually understanding that and letting it go deep is the key to unlock the door to happiness in any situation. So imagine if we could always remember we're not our bodies, we're eternal, spiritual souls who are connected to the Supreme, to Krishna, right? And so this world doesn't become the end all be all for everything at all times. We don't have to get offended about everything that is being done to our bodies or to our extensions, which is our family members or community or country, nationality, all these things. We could simply understand that everybody's covered, right? We're all struggling to try to get out of here. But that really naturally what we are is we're spiritual beings. And imagine seeing life and the world through those lenses of spirituality. It would change the world. And if we can start on this path of realizing that's who we truly are, then we can incorporate or get closer to that goal of understanding who really truly is in the middle, and how much connecting to that person will make us actually happy. And so, that was a really powerful lesson on how important it is to do some work with that foundation, because if we don't have that foundation strong, anything else that we're going to hear in the Gita, it's not going to make that much sense.
That's
we don't start.
And I see what you're doing here, and I really like it, because you took the point I made about envy and you connected right back to the point that really inspired you from class yesterday, which is we are not the body, but really we are not the body, right? And you connected to that by saying, hey, if you do realize that you're not the body, then you are free from the envy of Krishna that you have because you're thinking you are the body. And that can be a medicine for that as well, correct? I understood your point, correct, right?
Yes.
That's a great point. I see now how it was so powerful to you, now this point that we're not the body. You know, something that I like to add to that, when we say we are not the body, I think there's two levels to that. From our Vedic perspective, matter is not just gross matter, it is gross and subtle. So our body is made out of gross and subtle matter. So when we say we're not the body, we are rejecting matter. But then again, there's these two parts, right? The gross and the subtle. So when we say we are the body, we may, or just want to clarify this point for someone who may be listening, that we're not just referring to the gross aspect of our body, like our bones and our flesh and so on. But there's also the subtle part of our body that we are also rejecting, which is the mind. And to me, that's even more difficult, like to comprehend. I am not this body, which comes with this mind. I am not the body, and I am not this mind either. Because I can see, like, if I look at a picture of myself when I was 10 years old, I can pretty clearly see I'm not that body anymore. But this mind is still here, that wants to be the center, that envies Krishna, that wants respect from others. But guess what? I'm not that mind either. So it's such a powerful point. I am not this body, the complete body, both the gross and the subtle. I'm not any of that. You know, I'm truly the spiritual. So I agree. It's a very powerful point.
And also,
Thank
I think what pulls it together, which I've been thinking about for the past couple of weeks, is not being the doer, where there have been situations where I'm getting frustrated because if something doesn't get done, you know, I need to do it. And then getting reminded with how, oh, if something needs to get done, it can get done in a different way, where Krishna might bring in a different resource, or oh, something, you know, if I did it so well that, oh, you know, kudos to me, when it's not really me, it's whatever grace or gift that, or circumstances that Krishna brought in to make it run smoothly. Once again, I'm not the doer. And I've been feeling a lot of feeling ridiculous to some degree recently, thinking how much I'm the doer
I
in
can
both
relate to that.
good and bad situations. So yeah, it's very eye-opening and comforting, I think.
Mm.
So
Yeah, liberating.
yeah, the whole idea of surrender, you know, in this world, a lot of us, me especially, we get into this idea of, oh, this wrong is being done to me, and oh, I need to fix it for them, and just all this false ego. And when really, you know, the concepts that we're talking about today, you're not the body and you're not the doer. That whole surrender, like, just give it up, just breathe, a sigh of relief. For me, I think the idea of surrender to a God, surrender to a teacher, surrender to other devotees in the community has been really comforting for someone who's been previously very independent.
Mm. Yeah.
Wonderful.
All right. Well, thank you guys. Yeah, it was such a great class last night, and thank you for all your input and your knowledge, your sharing of your knowledge today. So, and thank you everyone for listening. And we post episodes every week. Please share it with your friends if you feel drawn to do so, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Hare
Haribol.
Krishna.